בשעת הנעילה. מתי מספק אירועים לך היינו עושים ומזלים בחילה בשעת הנעילה. שוקעים לך נפשם מחי פישם וחשם וחצי המחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. הם להם לסדרה וחצי לממרה וחתמם להוד ולגילה בשעת הנעילה. חון אותם ברחם וכל לוחץ ולוחם עשה בהם דלילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. זכרו תצחת אביכם וחדש את ימיכם כקדם ותהילה בשעת הנעילה. חרנה שנת רצון וחשם שעה חצון לא הוא לי ולא לה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. תזכו לשנים רבות הפנים והאבות בציצה וביצלה בשעת הנעילה. מיכאל שר ישראל, אליהו וגבריאל בספונה הגאולה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה. אל נורא עלילה, אל נורא עלילה, המצא לנו מחילה בשעת הנעילה.
Amen, amen. I have to say I didn't plan to play the entire song, but I loved seeing people dancing so much I couldn't turn it off. That was wonderful seeing you all. Welcome everybody to Integral Kabbalah session number 7, I believe we're on. Yeah. And we're going to be exploring the Sefirot of NETZAKH today. So let's briefly move through the Sefirot as we have done them already. And as we do them, we can not just talk about them intellectually, but actually practice connecting with them. So we're beginning with Ketter. Sefirot of Ketter is the recognition of the fact of isness, the fact of being, that it's here right now. It's so simple and so obvious that it's almost not even a thought. We still have to use our mind a little bit to point ourselves to that. But once we're there, no more thought is needed because there's nothing we're figuring out or evaluating. We're simply being in the presence of what is. And we can bring ourselves to this any moment. And it's a good practice to bring ourselves back to it again and again. This is an aspect, I'm just seeing the great texts here, or chats, I should say. This is an aspect of Devakute, of being aware of the Nora Alila, the awesome transcendent quality that is ever present in this moment. And when we do that, we can naturally come into the next sphera, which is Chokhmah, which is the recognition that in this reality, in this moment, that we are aware. It's really the one thing that we know for sure. Everything else may or may not be true, but we don't really ultimately ever know for sure what is true. Of course, we assume that we do. For it doesn't help us to constantly question whether whether we're in a mad scientist's petri dish or not, and we don't really know it. It doesn't help us to do that. But if we examine the nature of thought itself, we recognize that all of our thinking is an approximation or a map or an evaluation of reality. And it's there to serve a purpose, but it doesn't give us ultimate truth. But we do have ultimate truth in the sense that we know for sure that we are aware right now. That's the one thing that's indisputable. It's a little different from Descartes' I think, therefore I am. It's not I think, therefore I am. It's I am aware, therefore I am. And to know that is also thinking. We're also thinking that thought, but the thought is referring to something that's beyond thinking, which is, of course, the next sphera, which is Bina. And Bina is indispensable. Bina is the quality that we don't really have developed so much when we're in the womb, and we develop it over a lifetime, whereas Chokhmah was always there. Chokhmah is the quality of perceiving. And so it doesn't matter how intelligent we are, or how it doesn't matter how developed our thoughts are, that quality of awareness is always there. But the ability for Bina, that is the thinking mind, to recognize that we are conscious, that's something that we have to develop. And so as we speak it now, that's what we're doing. Our thinking mind is recognizing the oneness and recognizing that we are conscious. Then we skipped all the way down to Malchut. And Malchut brings us out of this absolute world of being and consciousness and thought, pointing us toward that, which is completely in the present moment. Malchut is the application of this consciousness in the world, and in the and the essence of that is the recognition of this oneness, this divine reality that present in all situations, in all beings, in all things, in all thoughts, in all feelings, in everything that occurs, in all events, that presence is there, and putting ourselves on a heart level and on a mind and heart level, but aiming towards action, that our living of life is aimed at service of that. So it's very much bringing ourselves into the world of time, into decisions, into what we're doing, into identity, and so on. How do we make this world, which spans the whole spectrum from heaven to hell? Heaven to hell is very real. It's all happening here in the world. But how do we recognize the world as Malchut, as the kingdom of the divine? It's all about how we relate to it. And so that's the practice, is bringing that transcendent consciousness that we access through Chokhmah and Bina and the recognition of Ketter, the underlying oneness, and we make that part of how we live. So that's the ongoing challenge of living a spiritual life, and particularly living a Jewish life. And particularly auspicious for this time of Elul, which is leading to Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah is really more than any other sphera, it is Malchut, because it is the ritualization of proclaiming the divine as that which we are serving, as that which is in charge, of that which is the creator, as well as the essence of all things. Then we moved on then we moved to Yasod. And Yasod is reminding us that in order to do any of this work, we need a foundation. We need some kind of support. And on the external level, that means doing it with other people. It means the community that's happening right now in this group. People coming together to give attention and learning and action to the path. And on an inner level, it's that basic quality of positivity, of having of turning our attitude towards the positive. We practice that in meditation just by simply bringing a little bit of a smile to our lips when we're meditating, in order to be a channel for the quality of joy that's inherent in presence. And we reveal it just by doing something with our bodies, putting a little smile. So this is the quality of joy. It's also something that can be felt as bliss, as pleasure, which is part of the fruit of meditation. Then we moved on to Hod last week. And Hod has to do with it's a quality that's already there, but it gets covered up by the phenomenon of ego. And ego, we all know that ego means being arrogant, but it's more fundamental than that. It really has to do with a process that we can call identification of consciousness with thought and feeling. In other words, we think certain things, we feel certain things, and we usually unconsciously think that that's me. Those thoughts and feelings are me. And of course, they are part of us. They're an authentic part of us, all of our thoughts and feelings. But when we do that, we unwittingly obscure the deeper I, the deeper self from which thoughts and feelings arise. That is the consciousness, the field of consciousness, which was there before we had much of a personality, before we had much of a, or personality is not the right words, but before we had a story, before we had opinions about things. And so Hod is that quality of humility, but it's also the recognition of all of that support that we're receiving from Yasod, all of the goodness that we're receiving, bringing ourselves to a state of gratitude. It's the opposite of being entitled. Gratitude, right, is the opposite of being entitled to things, feeling entitled. And I also mentioned that Hod and NETZAKH, that if we're really going to talk about Hod or NETZAKH, it's important to talk about both of them because they form a counterpoint to each other. In order to uncover that quality of Hod, which we can think of as, which it literally means glory or splendor, which has this radiant kind of royal quality. But in the teachings, it's associated with the root, which means confession, and confession is associated with humility, of course, and also gratitude. So the prayer I mentioned last week was Modeh Ani or Moda Ani, the prayer that said the moment you wake up in the morning. It means I thank you for being alive another day, but it also has this quality of and I'm at your mercy. I'm surrendered. It's not by my own doing. There's a quality of humility in there as well. But in order to bring forth that quality of humility, we have to be we really have to bring in our will, and the will is the tendency of will is to solidify into the opposite of humility. When we feel very intent about something, we say, I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to work towards this. I'm going to accomplish this. It's not a negative thing. It's actually essential. We're getting into NETZAKH now. This is the quality of NETZAKH. We need that will, which is commitment and the ability to follow through with a vision and to see things through to success and to not be thwarted by not success when we fail at things, to get back on the horse, so to speak, and keep going. These are all the qualities of NETZAKH. But the aim of NETZAKH in the spiritual sense, meaning applied as a spiritual practice, is to bring forth the quality of Hod, which is the opposite quality. So Hod is about gratitude for this moment, for how it is, and NETZAKH is about following through with our commitments to move forward. But the paradox is we're moving forward into not moving forward. In other words, we're progressing every day. If we're practicing and we're meditating, it's probably not a straight path, but a crooked path. The crooked path forward is toward greater surrender, humility, gratitude in the present moment. And we're getting better and more connected with that each day because we're practicing every day, and that's NETZAKH. So that's the paradox of how they work together. They're both so super important. There's some stories about this NETZAKH quality that I want to share with you. The first one has to do with actually both stories are fasting stories. They're both about the avodah, that means the spiritual practice of fasting, which is kind of the type of practice that's mentioned in these stories most often because it's most harsh. It takes the most kind of will to say, okay, I'm not going to eat or drink for several hours. So in this story, this is a disciple of the seer of Lublin, who I mentioned last week too, the seer of Lublin, who was disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was second after Baal Shem Tov. And this disciple was going to visit his master, the seer of Lublin, and it was Friday. And he had been doing this practice of fasting from Sabbath to Sabbath. Okay? Now that practice is not fasting 25-hour fasts, it's fasting just during the daylight hours. So this was very common. Both in the times leading up to the advent of Hasidism in the 1700s, there was a lot of asceticism going on among very pious, mystically minded Jews. And it was into that environment of a lot of fasting and, self-negation and so on that Hasidism came about. And Hasidism was critical of that. It didn't say don't ever do that, but it was saying that it needs to be balanced by the other side of the tree, so to speak. And so this fellow was fasting Shabbat to Shabbat, and he was on his way. He's traveling to the seer's home, and on his way, he came upon a well of water, and he was suddenly overcome with the most intense thirst that he had ever experienced. And he thought, oh my God, I am going to die if I don't drink some water right now. I can't help myself. I'm going to drink the water. And he goes and he's looking at the water and he's like, oh, I've got to resist this temptation. I made the commitment. If I drink the water, it ruins the whole week, because the whole point, the intention that I had was to fast from Shabbat to Shabbat, and it's already Friday. I only have a few hours left to go. So, and he walks away from the well, and he accomplishes his ascetic feat. He resists the temptation of drinking, and he starts to feel, wow. He starts to feel some pride at that. I did it, I overcame temptation. And instantly he recognized within himself that he was feeling this pride. And he thought, you know what? This pride is worse than if I had drunk the water. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to drink the water to get rid of this pride. I'm going to be a failure on purpose. And so he goes back and he dips into the well. He takes the water up. He's about to drink it. And then he realizes that miraculously his thirst went away. And he thought, oh, well, I guess I don't have to drink, but I'm not going to feel pride about it because I don't even feel like drinking. The urge is gone. So he puts down the water and he travels on his way. And when he comes to the home of this seer, he enters the threshold, and his master snaps at him in a sort of a sharp, somewhat angry way and says, "Patchwork," to him. Patchwork. Now, it's a little bit of a strange story. It was for me anyway. When I read this story, probably when I was a teenager, for the first time, and just because we don't use that term, in English, we don't snap at each other, patchwork. And I don't understand fully the context of the Yiddish. I'm sure that has a basis in Yiddish as an expression of telling someone something that is that they're doing wrong. But Buber, who translates this tale and writes about it in a little book. No, I thought I had the book. Yeah, here it is. This is a little book by Martin Buber called The Way of Man, where he talks about a bunch of different Hasidic tales, and he gives his own interpretation, and he talks about his own struggling with this story, and how he thought, what is the seer of Lublin getting at? I mean, he's being really harsh. I mean, this guy did well. I mean, he overcame temptation, and then he noticed in himself the pride, so he responded to that by going back to drink. And so what is the seer snapping at him about? And what he eventually comes to, which I think is a great teaching, and I have to agree with, is that the opposite of patchwork is of a piece. Patchwork means things stitched together that are disparate, and the opposite of that is just one piece of cloth that's not patchwork. And so what he seems to be telling him is, you are shilly-shallying. You're going this way, you're going that way. Oh, maybe I should do blah, 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 blah. And those things they're disrupting the essential point of the practice, which is to unify yourself in a particular path and to follow it through. That's what NETZAKH is about. NETZAKH is about, it doesn't mean like, well, if this happens, then I'm going to get thrown off this way. And if this happens, I'm going to get thrown off this way. There seems to be a prerequisite to doing any kind of avodah, which is the prerequisite of unifying yourself first before you do the avodah. Now, in Moshe Idel is a scholar of Kabbalah, and he writes about history of Kabbalah and Hasidism and so on. And he wrote something very interesting, I thought, which is related to this. It's another example of this kind of thing, which is that in Kabbalah, classical Kabbalah, the quality of Devakute, or Devakis as it's pronounced, the Yiddish pronunciation, Devakis, means to be connected to the divine. And Devakut was often seen as the fruit of the practice. In other words, you study, you learn, you pray, you meditate, you do your avoda, and over time you develop this connection with the divine. That's the fruit of the practice. In Hasidism, they gave the exact opposite teaching, which is that first you have to unify yourself with the divine, then you can do any of those other things. They turn it around. In other words, from the Hasidic point of view, unity with the divine is not something you accomplish 10 years down the road after a lot of work. It's something you realize right now in this moment. It takes no time at all. There's only God. Here it is. There, you're unified with the divine. And then you do whatever you're going to do with that consciousness. And when you do that, then the work you're doing deepens that and strengthens it and expresses it. It builds something from that. It builds an inner structure and expresses itself in your deeds in the world as well. But first you have to have Devakute, and Devakute is something very, very simple. And this was the radical thing about Hasidism, is that it kind of destroys the whole tendency for the tradition to be elitist. Because when you say you have to learn all these things and all these texts and do all these things, and then eventually one day you'll have Devakute, that's elitist. You know, who can afford even to spend that much time learning and so on? The peasants certainly couldn't, and that's why they were excluded during that. That was one of the crises of Jewish culture at that time, is there was this huge split between the learned and most other people, most other Jewish people. Baal Shem Tov came along and said, no, you're a holy neshama already. That's the part we begin with, not the part we end with. It's really, of course, not either or. You know, like all spiritual teachings, these are just two different ways of looking at it, and they both completely have their validity. But in the case of NETZAKH, for example, which simply means the commitment to follow through in your daily practice, both are very important. In other words, it's important to come to the practice with the right intention, the right kavanah, which is a humble kavanah. You know, it's like, thank God that I even have the ability to do this, to receive this tradition and to practice it in any way. Thank God, what an amazing thing. That's like the opposite of saying, oh, I have to do this because I made the commitment, right? So you're bringing the right attitude to it from the beginning. But at the same time, through practicing every day, of course, our consciousness becomes transformed. There's a transformation that happens from practicing. And yet, on the other hand, again, it's like Fiddler on the Roof. It's like always going back and forth. On the other hand, when the fruit of the practice happens, to whatever degree it happens, it's a gift. It's not because I made this great effort. And so this is the paradox of NETZAKH and Hod, and we have to always kind of take to reference another Jewish teaching, take the correct slip of paper out of our pocket with the right note on it. If you're not familiar with that teaching, there's a famous teaching about having two slips of paper in each pocket, and one of them says the world was created for me, and the other one says I am dust and ashes. And we need to know, we have to have the wisdom, only we can do it, only we can sense in ourselves, is that are we being snatched, are we being captive, held captive by ego, and then we need to look at that dust and ashes slip, or are we starting to feel like we don't matter, like we have nothing, like our existence is not significant? No. I don't know how old the universe is, something like, I don't know, I think 4.5 billion years old or something. And it all came to this moment. It produced you right now. This is the moment. This is your task. You have something to do in this world. So that brings us to the second story that I want to share. This is a story of a fellow by the name of Rabbi David. Rabbi David of Lelov. And he was, just like the disciple in the first story, he was an ascetic. And in this story, he wasn't just fasting from Shabbos to Shabbos. He had fasted for 6 years. 6 years he didn't eat or drink during the day, except on Shabbat, of course. In some of the festivals, it's forbidden to fast. But for the most part, he's fasting for 6 years. And he hoped to accomplish something. You know, he hoped that it would produce that Devakute, that unity with the divine in himself. And it didn't. So he fasted for another 6 years. 12 years he fasted. And he still felt there was something missing. It wasn't really it wasn't really working for him. So he had heard of Rebbe Elimelech of Lezhinsk. Now, Elimelech of Lezhinsk was he had a brother who was Reb Zusha of Honeypole, and they were both disciples of the Maggid. And there's all kinds of stories about them. There were two brothers who traveled around together, and they had opposite personalities. And Zusha was like the crazy fool. He would literally go into fits of ecstasy when anyone would mention any words of Torah, so that he'd have to be taken out of the room because he would disturb everybody. He had spiritually induced seizures, it seems like, from the text. His brother, on the other hand, was very did things according to the protocols. He had what's the word? Like he had manners. That was Elimelech, and Elimelech, though, was known as a person who really could help those on the path and transform souls. So Rabbi David went to visit Elimelech and made the journey. As many of these stories go, he comes on Friday afternoon to spend Shabbos with Rabbi Elimelech. And when he gets there, all of the Hasidim are coming into the Beit Midrash. The prayers are about to start. And Rabbi Elimelech is shaking hands with every single person who comes in to greet them. And when Rabbi David gets to him, he just turns away from him and shakes the hand of the next guy, completely snubs him, completely ignores him. And Rabbi David is aghast. What is this? And he walks out of there and he says, I can't believe he did that to me. It was completely inappropriate. So he goes back to the inn and he doesn't even go to the prayers. He davens in his room. But a little later, he starts to think to himself, you know what, maybe he didn't really see me or something, or maybe he thought I was someone else that was not a good person, and I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm going to go back. So he goes back, and the prayers are just finishing. He comes in again. He extends his hand to shake hands with the Rebbe. Again, the Rebbe turns away from him and ignores him. And he's devastated. He goes back to his room. He cries all night. He doesn't understand what he did. Why is he being treated this way? He spends all of Shabbos by himself in the inn. And he resolves himself that when Shabbos is over, he's going to make the journey back to his home. And that's it. Never going to visit this Rebbe again. But when toward the late afternoon, when the time of the third meal happens, and during this Shalosh Sudas time, as it's called, the time in Hasidic circles, that's usually the time where the Rebbe gives their teachings. And so he starts to get this impulse to go back again and to try to listen in a little bit on the teachings. He says, no, I can't go back there. But it keeps eating at him. He says, all right, I'm just going to go and just check it out a little bit. He goes there and he stands by the window, which is open, and he can hear the teachings, and he goes and he listens, and he hears the Rebbe talking, and the Rebbe says, you know, it sometimes happens that a person thinks they can perfect themselves through fasting, and a person can fast for 6 years and never really accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. So they fast another 6 years and still nothing. And so sometimes it happens that a person like that comes to me to get that little something that they need still. But the truth is, I can't give it to them because this person has been fasting for 12 years to the idol of their own pride. All that they've been accomplishing is building up their own ego. That type of person has to be completely broken down and has to start serving Hashem from the bottom up. And when David heard this, he almost fainted. He was shaking, he was shuddering, he almost collapsed, and he made his way to the door, made his way to the threshold, and tears were streaming down his face. And he opened the door, but he didn't come in, didn't dare come in. And immediately, Rabbi Elimelech stood up and looked at him right in the eyes of the door and said, Baruch haba, Rabbi David is here, Baruch haba, come welcome Rabbi David. And he sat him next to him at the table. And his son, Rabbi Elimelech's son Eliezer, whispered to him. He said, "Abba, I don't understand. This man, you could barely stand the sight of him yesterday. Why the change?" And Elimelech said, "No, no, no, my son, you don't understand. That was a completely different person. This is Holy Rabbi David." I get verklempt telling this story. It's such a beautiful story. And it illustrates, once again, that this balance between NETZAKH and Hod. You might think that the story is saying, you know what? It's worthless that he fasted for those 12 years, but it's not really saying that, because it was through that intention and that effort that he put in that brought him to that brink. He did everything he could. Sometimes that happens in life, not just spiritually, but with other things and anything. It can happen that we try every avenue, we try everything we can, and we come to the end of our rope with something. And it's only then that we are able to actually see the path that's going to take us where we want to go. Because we wouldn't have seen it, because we don't want to take that path. And in the spiritual sense, of course, ego, generally speaking, its very nature is it doesn't want to give up, because it's like it has a survival instinct, like any creature. And so sometimes it's only a painful circumstance that can help to burst through. What Elimelech did is there are plenty of stories of spiritual masters doing this kind of thing, which seems like a not nice thing, but they are actually helping the person to go beyond, to get to the level that they need to get to by going beyond what the ego that's holding them back. So this is NETZAKH and Hod. There's also a nice hint of this paradox of our will, putting in the effort, but also surrendering and recognizing that the fruit that comes to us through our effort is actually not through our effort, but it's from grace in the Parsha of this week. So let's take a look. Here we go. Parshat Ki Tetzei. Ki Tetzei means when you go out. Ki is when. Tetzei means you go out. Ki tetzei lamilchama al oyevecha untano Adonai Elohecha biadecha vishavita shivyo. When you go out to battle your enemies, and Hashem, your divinity, gives them into your hands, and you capture their captivity. Okay, it's a little bit of a strange, there's a few strange things about this sentence. First of all, you're going out to battle your enemies, and yet somehow it is Hashem that is putting them in your hands. It's not your own effort. Now this word, ki, highlights this paradox, because one way you can translate the word ki is when, which is how it's translated here. But ki can also be translated as because. It also means because. So in other words, because you make the effort to go out against your enemies, it's because of your effort that something happens which is not from your effort. Something that comes to you from grace. We make the effort to go out to do the battle, but the success of our efforts comes to us. It's a gift. Now, another piece of this is let's see here. This is also the quality of NETZAKH, of course, that the victory that's placed in our hands, NETZAKH means victory, is something that is a gift given to us. So when looked at in the spiritual sense, we're not talking about external enemies now. We're talking about doing battle with our own ego nature. The reason we can do this, the reason we can overcome it, is because there's something deeper than the ego, and we already are that. It's not something we have to create, and that's why it's it's a gift. Like we didn't create ourselves. We didn't choose to come into the world, or maybe maybe we did on some level. That's a different line of thinking, but we it certainly doesn't make sense to say that we created our essence, because we would have had to be there already to create it. we are we emerge from the divine, or from reality itself. It's given to us. Our nature is, that's why it's also called our heritage, our nachala, our birthright, so to speak. And so we are able to have victory of achieving inner freedom because it already is there. It's already part of our essence. Nevertheless, we still have to make the effort to practice and to learn and to give it attention so as to receive the gift that's being given to us. And through this, we can accomplish what? The last part of the verse, Vishavita Shivyo, you capture their captivity. It's kind of a strange phrase, capture their captivity. But the idea here is that the tendency is to be captive by the ego. The ego draws us in. It seduces our consciousness into identification with our thoughts and feelings. It happens unconsciously. That's the ordinary direction, is for us to be captivated by ego. But we can capture the captivity by recognizing that, by first and foremost, by recognizing ego. Okay, I think that's highlighted very well in the story where Rabbi David is sitting by the window. It's like he was already hurt, right? Like it wasn't the hurt that actually ultimately helped him. The hurt was the prerequisite because it brought his attention to the ego, but he didn't recognize it as ego until he heard the story coming from the window. Oh, you can fast for 6 years and another 6 years, but it's all pride. Oh, then he could recognize, oh, I've been held captive by the ego, even though I've been trying so hard. And in recognizing it, we're free from it. The energy of it may still be there, right? He's not suddenly like, oh, okay, now I'm free from it. No, he's crying, he's shaking. There's a lot of aftermath, but essentially he's free from it at that point. So we have a chant, a prayer that I'd like to do for today. This is part of the Slichot service, just as one of our other prayers was, Rachamana. We have Rachamana in the class as well. Rachamana is from one of the piyutim from Slichot, and this is as well. Now this version of it is one that appears in our Torah of Awakening High Holiday Machzor. It's a little bit updated. It's not quite as long. It doesn't have all of the verses. And it also has a balancing of gender. So Anenu is the masculine, Aninu is the feminine, and we talk about Shechinat Imotenu, the divine presence of our mothers answer us, is the second verse. And so we have a masculine and feminine version of Anenu, Aninu. And the way I'd like to do it is I will sing each verse, and you can hear me sing it and then sing it out along with me. I'll repeat each verse. Sing it out from wherever you are. I'm sorry. Anenu Avotenu Aneinu. Together. Aneinu Elohei Avotenu Aneinu Aninu Shechinat Imotenu Aninu Aninu Shechinat Imotenu Aninu Anenu Magen Avraham Anenu Anenu Magen Avraham Anenu Anenu Uforget et Sarah Anenu Aninu Ufoked et Sarah Aninu Anenu Haone Beit Ratzon Anenu Anenu Haone Beit Ratzon Anenu Aninu Ha'ona ve'etzara Aninu Aninu Ha'ona ve'etzara Aninu Aninu Elohei HaMerkava Aninu Anenu Elohei HaMerkava Anenu Anenu Rachum V'Chanun Anenu Anenu Rachum V'Chanun Anenu. And preparing to come into meditation, bringing your bodies into a comfortable but alert position, preferably with back straight as you can. Not having more tension than necessary, but having some tension there to hold your body so that there's an alertness in your muscles. Bringing right hand to your heart. Taking this attitude of offering attention, offering consciousness, offering awareness, offering yourself on the altar of the present moment. Giving your attentiveness to the divine presence, which is manifest as all things that appear right now in your awareness with Lecha. Deep breath in. Lecha. And bringing left hand to your belly, feeling awareness shining down into your organs, soaking into yourselves, giving life, giving healing energy to your body, shining down to your legs, to your feet and toes, shining upward into your heart, lungs, shoulders, neck, down through your arms to your hands and fingers, shining into your face, facial muscles, brain and nervous system, bringing a little smile to your lips to express this quality of Yasod, of joy, positivity, benevolence, for consciousness to dwell in the temple of the body. And resting awareness on the flow of your breathing, breathing naturally. And anchoring body awareness with Naaseh. Deep breath in. And with your left hand on your belly, bringing right hand to lightly touch your forehead. Awareness shining out into the space around your body. Noticing things, beings, the light, the feel of the space, the air. Knowing that all this perception arises in the vast and formless silent field of consciousness that you are within and beyond the body, within and beyond mind and heart, filling and transcending. Venishma, deep breath in. Venishma. Kissing your fingers, relaxing your hands. Atahu Atyahi. You who are the source and substance, you who are reality itself, you who are Ketter and Malchut. You are this. There is no separation. You are present in all things. We rest consciousness in you and in the vibration of the words. Atahu 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 Atyahi 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 Atahu 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 Atyahi 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 Atahu allowing the thinking mind to rest in the vibrations of the tefillah, noticing thoughts as they come, but not being drawn in, just noticing, being the space of welcome to whatever arises, and bringing the mind back again and again to the tefillah, Tahu, Atyahi, and we'll sit together for a few minutes in silence.
Aneinu Elohei Avoteinu Aneinu Aneinu Elohei Avoteinu Aneinu Aninu Shechinat Imoteinu Aninu Aninu Shechinat Imoteinu Aninu Aninu Magin Avraham Aninu Aninu Magin Avraham Aninu Aninu ופוקד את זרע ענינו, ענינו ופוקד את זרע ענינו, ענינו העונה בעת רצון ענינו, ענינו העונה בעת רצון ענינו, ענינו העונה בעת צרה ענינו, ענינו העונה בעת צרה ענינו, ענינו אלוהי המרכבה ענינו, ענינו אלוהי המרכבה ענינו, רחום וחנון ענינו, ענינו, רחום וחנון ענינו.
Rise as the ark is open.
Amen. Amen. Okay, and let's close the meditation for today, bringing right hand to your heart. Once again, offering awareness with lecha and a long out breath, deep breath in. Lecha. And bringing left hand to your belly, feeling awareness shining down into your organs and shining out upwards and downwards to fill the entire temple of your body with the light of presence. Naaseh, deep breath in. Naaseh. And bringing right hand to lightly touch your forehead, awareness shining outward, knowing yourself as this vast, open, boundless field, this field of pure consciousness, perceiving all qualities, whereas it itself is simply light, containing fullness, resonating in the body as joy and bliss, without holding on to anything in particular, without attachment to thought or feeling, but perceiving thought and feeling. You are this vastness. Venishma, deep breath in. Venishma. Pardon me, kissing your fingers, relaxing your hands. As we come into this first week of the month of Elul, and we are carried by the auspicious currents of Teshuvah during this time, may our connection with our own innermost essence, the truth of what we are, become ever deepened, and may that resonate and manifest in thoughts and words and actions. May we be helped by the divine hand, so to speak, that greater blessing and healing shall come to this world. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru Amen. Amen.
They're short. I don't want to take a lot of time. But when you spoke about NETZAKH, that we need to follow a path that is smooth and not undistracted, and that is our journey, is to create that for ourselves. Does that factor in human imperfections? My other question is, what is the symbolism of the chariot? In the chant, it said it was written, divinity of the chariot. Is the chariot a symbol of some vehicle in which we get to the divine, such as a practice? Check.
Okay, great questions. I'm not sure I totally understood the first question, though. Can you, you mentioned that I had mentioned something about being smooth and undistracted, and I wasn't sure which part of what I said was that. Can you just clarify that a little bit? Was that
Yes.
focusing on, or maybe just help me focus a little bit more on that first question?
Sure. So it's more of the definition of NETZAKH that I'm questioning, and how we could be more in line with it given our human imperfections.
Okay. First of all, I want to apologize. I bet the sound wasn't so good a minute ago. I just put the microphone closer. Okay. So what you're asking is actually the main point of that balance between NETZAKH and Hod. Because NETZAKH, as I was saying, is about having will and following through and being committed, and really making sure you practice every day, you learn every day, and so on. But at the same time, a big part of the meaning of the two stories that I told, and the thing that will allow that NETZAKH quality to really fly and work, is that it has to be balanced by by Hod, which means not creating ego out of our intentions and our will. And the best way to do that is to fail. So that's where our imperfections come in, is that, look, the idea on the spiritual path is to use whatever's available to us. So on those days that we are able to really follow through and do well, that's great. That's the more obvious thing to do. That's what we should strive for and encourage ourselves to do. And in the times when we fail, either in our daily practice or in things that happen in life where we're not really expressing, living at our highest level, which of course happens, and that's part of the function of life from a spiritual point of view, is to trigger those things out of us, because that's how we it's through failure that we learn. We have to fail in order to learn. And the point is not failing, or is not trying to not fail. The point is using our failures to grow. And when we use our failures to grow, we also simultaneously are helping to overcome the unconscious ego accumulation that can happen when we think we don't fail. That's why it's so dangerous. I mean, you hear it nowadays so much. It's like, it's the exact opposite of Elul. It's like everybody's talking about how the other person is wrong. And it's so difficult to, for a person to take responsibility for themselves. I'm talking a little bit about media and politics now, but I'm not going to get specific. But the tendency, I mean, it's just part of our culture that we are trying to knock the other person down and not take responsibility. It's the opposite of Elul. And then we're not using the gift. Like, our failures are actually a gift that can help us to be open and humble, which means transparent to our nature, which is already there. It's something we don't have to manufacture, and that's the Hod part too. So, so I hope that helps. That's really the idea, is to use our failures constructively in those two ways. One, to learn from them, not to just say, oh, I'm just failing again and again and again, but to really think about it, try to learn, try to do better. But then if you fail again, we all do, then using that also to relax the that ego tendency that accumulates. And the second thing you asked was about the Merkava, the chariot. It's a really good question. So Merkava does come up in different ways in the tradition, and I don't know why it's used specifically in this tefillah. So that's something I have to research. Maybe I can post later about that. But I can tell you that yes, there was an actual practice that's referred to in the Talmud and another Baraito, pieces of text from that time, from the Talmudic time, that referred to a practice called Ma'aseh Merkava, which means workings of the chariot. And that was it was obviously a mystical practice through which one would project oneself into some kind of astral vehicle, like an astral chariot, through which they would travel through the upper worlds. And the texts of those times are really far out. They involve knowing secret angelic names to gain entrance to the various levels of heaven. Merkava Mysticism appears to be one of the foundations of Kabbalah, but in later Kabbalah it's not directly referred to, meaning like it doesn't talk about people doing that particular technique. But of course the language of the Merkava, in the general sense of microphone is syncing, I have to hold it. In the general sense of having a vehicle through which we develop spiritually and connect with these various upper forces, Sefirot and letters and so on, carries through. So one of the things to know about is that in our Wednesday night group, which is now also practicing on Friday mornings, we do a practice that's similar to that. It's a kind of Merkava practice, whereby we build a visualization of the Sefirot and Hebrew letters around the body. So it creates a kind of chariot through which we then practice meditation after building the Merkava mentally and through certain chants. So if you're interested in that, you can also learn more about that on TorahofAwakening.com. I talk about that a lot. And also I'll put in, let's see, I'm going to put the link in the chat as well to try out the membership, because when you do that, it also talks about that practice. There we go. And yes, we're going to do, I got a note, we're going to do shofar today, because shofar happens every day of Elul and Tishrei, all the way up through the end of I'm sorry, not Simchat Torah, but the end of Sukkot. And we'll do that after we have a little talking. Okay, how about Manya?
Hi, Brian. It's just a technical question that I have actually about, I missed the meditation practice on Friday, of the 10 Sefirot, and I was wondering, I didn't see it posted. Is it posted, and did I just miss it somewhere?
Yeah, everything we do is always posted.
Okay, I went to the index page and I didn't see it.
Yeah, so the way you get to that is it's what I call the 32 paths of presence practice is a feature of the 2 upper levels of membership. So the basic membership, we meet for learning and practice twice a week for an hour, Sundays and Tuesdays, and then Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday for 20 minutes. And then Wednesday nights and Fridays are a feature of the what I call the Ruach and Neshama level of membership. So you have to just log into that portal. When you log in, that portal will appear and you go there, and that's where all the past classes for that are. And you can also see them because I live stream them on the Facebook group, Mastering Presence Facebook group. So they're also there.
All right. I looked on the Facebook group, but I didn't see it. I'll look. Again.
Okay. You can also, in the Facebook group, I also made a post with a link to the where it is on the website as well. But if you log into the Ruach Neshama portal, it says, it says 6-week Mastering Presence or 32 Paths of Presence course, and you can access them all that way.
Okay, great. I guess I get confused sometimes as to where to find different things.
It is confusing. I really encourage also everybody who's a member, and if you become a member, that you log in and just poke around, look around, because there's so much stuff there.
Thank you. All right.
Absolutely. And if you ever have questions, just send me an email. I'm happy to answer and help however much is needed. Okay, very good. And Rahmana.
So sometimes I find a time lag between when something happens here and when I can access it on the Facebook pages. And what I discovered to my delight is that through Jewish Live, I can listen to these sharings immediately after, which is really great because there's certain times where I know my mind is like a sponge and it's saturated, and I come back into realizing I just missed what you just said.
Yeah.
So that gives me a way to do it immediately rather than waiting until you have time to do all the steps you do to put it onto the Facebook page or the website.
Right. So these Sunday sessions, which are only these 10 Sundays leading up to Rosh Hashanah, are going to be on Jewish Live. It is on Jewish Live right now. There might be some folks watching on there. Hello, folks on Jewish Live. By the way, if you're on Jewish Live Facebook, please leave a comment to let us know you're there. But also, the other stuff that I do during the week is also on the Torah of Awakening Facebook groups. Those should be available right away as well. Those are just the unedited versions, but then I clean them up a little bit for later, and those are on the website when you log in.
It says there are 3 people watching on the Jewish Live.
Oh, Baruch Hashem. Greetings to folks on Jewish Live. All right. Anybody else would like to say something or have a question or anything?
Well, I'm interested if you would do one of your Kabbalistic letter breakdowns for the Mem, Resh, what Kaf maybe for Merkava, or Bet. I don't know what all the letters are, but to do one of your Kabbalistic letter breakdowns for that word.
For Merkava? Were you asking specifically for Merkava?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I usually have a little time to think about those first, but I can. Let's look at it. So Merkava, Mem, Resh, Kaf, Bet, and Hey. So Mem has this quality of, so Mem and Resh both have this quality of transcendence. Mem is like water taking the form of whatever vessel it's poured into. So Mem, as a metaphor for consciousness, is this quality of merging, of beyond ego, of simply being one in alignment with the moment. Resh has to do with the recognition of the mind, that is, of the ego, of the personality, of our thinking mind, that we can't understand ultimate reality. So Mem is letting go of letting go of the mind, but Reish is the mind understanding that there's something beyond it. And so that's a form, a thought form. So we have the fluid, and we also have the thought pointing toward the fluid. We might even think of Mem and Reish as relating to Chokhmah and Bina in that sense. Kaf is another quality of Bina, which is the quality of making the decision to fully be present with, as the light of consciousness shining into the fullness of this moment. So we might say that Kaf is like kind of prior to the Mem, because Kaf is needed to make the decision to shine into this moment. Mem is merging with the moment, and Reish is that reverence. An English word, reverence, that begins with the letter R. We might relate that to Reish. And we're taking all of that and we are putting it in the context of a certain practice. That's the letter Bet. The letter Bet is house, or a container representing or referring to the temple, the idea of a temple, of having a sacred space that's set aside for that. So all of that is happening within the context of the Bet, which we might think of as, in this case, as being the Merkava, or the inner temple that we're building through our learning and contemplating. And that through doing this might lead us to a more full expression, more full self-expression, meaning that when we are living and talking and doing, that our deepest essence is being expressed, as opposed to the what we might call ego or separate self. And that's the letter Hey. The letter Hey is that self-expression that gives of itself into the world and then lets go of fruits of the result.
NETZAKH.
All right. And I think there was someone else. Is someone else there? I'm not seeing another hand, but maybe.
Betty has her real hand up.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I don't see that, but Betty, go ahead.
Mine is just a thought that came to mind from today's teachings that it was fun for me when we were talking about, like, through learning through humility. I'm a bubby of a 5-year-old grandson who is very, very bright. And I had a student like this years and years ago when I first was teaching kindergartners. And I don't know quite how to best have him understand that the most powerful learning comes from our unknowing, and like, I remember with this young student probably 30 years ago, telling him, Ilan, if you knew all of this, he would get upset when he didn't know. If you knew all of this, you wouldn't need to be here, and neither would I. So, we're here because we grow and learn from what we don't know. If we had all the answers already, you could stay home and I could stay home, and but so with my grandson now, I have the same kind of struggle trying. He's so bright. He understands humility. He knows when he gets arrogant, even at 5. He understands when he's getting caught up, but he is very, even at 5 years old, I've got a witness. We're mirroring each other all the time, our greatest teaching comes from our unknowing, So it's like life gives us the messages we're supposed to get, right? So he and I are learning together, I just don't quite know how to I have to wait for him to ask me the question, as opposed to me shoving it down his throat. Because he's that kid. Someday, it may be 15, 20 years from now, but someday he may ask me the question. And then then he'll be more apt to hear the answer, as opposed to me trying to. But anyway, I just wanted to say that
Nice.
Understanding humility and coming from a place of not knowing to knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I also think that when we drop little hints, giving a teaching, saying something like that to a child, like that there's value in not knowing, they may not get that at all in the moment. But the thing that we can do is try to say those things without ourselves getting caught in wanting them to get it.
Yeah.
And so therefore the tone is like important because that makes it more makes them more able to receive it. But by receive it, I don't mean they're going to get it. I mean that it's like a seed that's planted. And like you said, 25 years from now, yeah, they may ask, but they also might get it anyway. And then remember that that was a seed that they learned, from Bubby, way back when. That happens to me all the time. I I get something and then I realize, oh, that person told me that when I was little. And I didn't get that then. So we're in it for the long stretch.
Right, that's for sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, we're spending a lot of time here. I want to make sure we get to do shofar before we say goodbye. Not that I'm the best shofar blower, but I'm what you got. Amen. Shalom, you want to give us a little of your shofar? Amen. Amen. Kaveh, kaveh, kaveh el Hashem. Kaveh, kaveh, kaveh el Hashem. Kaveh el Hashem. Chazak v'yametz libecha. Kaveh
Chazak